Hello, my name is Damien O'Hara, and I'm an Alan Carr's Easy Way seminar facilitator. Before launching into this webcast, I wanted to take a couple of moments to explain a bit about the format of this presentation and how to get the best out of it. The webcast is split into 6 segments, averaging around 40 minutes each, adding up to a total of 4 hours. If you can, you should watch the segments in one sitting, in sequence, one after the other, with a smoke break in between. If this isn't possible, then we recommend splitting the webcast into 2. Watch the first 3 segments together, and then later the same day or the following day, watch the final 3 segments. If you're able to smoke while watching, that's great. Please smoke right up until the final cigarette at the end of part 5. If you need to leave the room to smoke, then our advice is to watch the segment until it ends and then go for a smoke break. Some people find this instruction to keep smoking a little bit odd, but we've been working this way since we started conducting our seminars in 1983. We're not saying that smoking helps people concentrate. If that were true, then smokers would be smarter than non-smokers, and clearly this isn't the case. It's more that it can be hard to concentrate while you're constantly being distracted of the need to smoke. So this is your first instruction today. Relax and smoke. You've been doing it for years. You can do it for another 4 hours. Now, I thought I would start the session today by giving you a brief overview of who we are and what we do. Alan Carr, who developed this method, Alan was a smoker for over 30 years. In the summer of 1983, after countless miserable attempts to quit smoking, Alan discovered a different way of looking at smoking, a different way of thinking about smoking. And he found that when he thought about cigarettes and smoking in this way, he had absolutely no desire to smoke. Now, if you think about it, if you have no desire to do something, it doesn't really take willpower not to do it, because you don't want to do it in the first place. So after years of smoking 5 packs a day, Alan just walked away from the whole thing, going from chain smoker to non-smoker in 1 day. At that moment, he understood that he had discovered something extremely special, an easy way to stop smoking. Now, what Alan found is that if he could accurately communicate the way he had shifted his perspective with respect to smoking, then other smokers could use exactly the same tools to shift their perspectives with respect to smoking. And of course, these people would also find it very easy to stop. Here we are, 25 years later. We have over 150 centers offering seminars in over 40 countries. We see around 50,000 smokers every year in our seminars. Alan's books, based on the seminar, have been extremely popular all over the world. His most successful book, a book called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking, has sold over 8 million copies since it was published in 1985. This is the book that Ellen DeGeneres often talks about on her show, and that Ashton Kutcher and Lou Reed have gone on record as saying helped them quit smoking. Now, Alan was not a doctor by training. Of all things, he was an accountant, actually. And as such, it took him many, many years to develop a reputation within the medical community. But today, the medical community really sees, or many of the medical community, see Alan as being one of the world's leading experts on quitting smoking. Now, the medical community is very suspicious, and I think rightly so, of people from outside who claim to have made breakthroughs in these kinds of areas. So it took Alan a long time to earn his stripes, to develop his reputation within the medical community. But I think over the years, these doctors and dentists just kept hearing these remarkable stories about how very long-term, very, very heavy smokers, self-described hopeless cases, were finding it ridiculously easy to quit smoking using this simple, drug-free approach. And as I said, today the medical community, or certain members of the medical community, are among our biggest supporters. Apart from referrals that we get from other people that have attended the seminar, our biggest source of referrals are from doctors and dentists. In fact, Alan's reputation within the medical community progressed even further, really, in 1997, when he was invited to address the World Health Organization. Every year, the World Health Organization have a congress on tobacco control, and at the time, Alan was the only person with no medical qualifications that had ever been invited to address this conference. Now, you know, we're not a Microsoft or an Intel or one of these huge organizations, but Alan Carr's Easy Way has grown to be a global phenomenon, and the reason that it is so successful is pure and simple because this method is so effective. Abraham Lincoln once said that you can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all of the time. It just seems obvious to me that you don't build a business over a 25-year period that has sold millions and millions of copies of this book and cured up to 10 million smokers without there's something being pretty special going on. The fact that we offer a money-back guarantee in our live seminars, I think, speaks for itself. Now, when I first heard of Alan Carr, it was 1985, and my mum gave me a copy of this book, The Easy Way to Stop Smoking. She gave me a copy of this book for Christmas. And just what every smoker wants for Christmas, huh? A book on how to stop smoking. Thanks a lot, Mum. Anyway, I started reading this book, and to be honest with you, it absolutely terrified me. Because right from the first paragraph, it was very, very clear that this was a man that really understood smoking. And he understood it not in the way that doctors understand it or that anti-smokers understand it, but the way smokers understand smoking. And I found this absolutely terrifying because I thought, if I finish reading this book, I'm going to have to stop smoking. So I tossed it away on my bookshelf where it stayed for 14 years before I made my way to one of Alan's seminars. I mean, I feel like an idiot because had I known then how ridiculously easy it is to stop smoking and how amazing life is as a non-smoker, I would have devoured that book all those years ago, back in 1985, and been done with the whole thing. But the thing that bugged me about Alan was this ridiculous claim that he used to make. I had seen, even back in 1985, I had seen Alan interviewed on TV many, many times, and he always said exactly the same thing. That any smoker can find it ridiculously easy to stop. That it's immediate, and it's permanent, that there is no withdrawal, there's no weight gain, there's no willpower required, there are no scare tactics, you know, no pictures of diseased lungs or fatty deposits clogging up your arteries or anything like that. And in addition to being easy, quitting smoking can be one of the most enjoyable and one of the most empowering experiences of your life. Now, you say that to a room full of smokers, and what kind of response do you get? Yeah, right. But you know what? I went from 60 a day to none, just like that, in a seminar just like this. And even today, all these years later, I still look back on those first weeks and months of being a non-smoker as being among the happiest of my life. You see, even as a relatively young man, I was such a heavy smoker and such a terrible quitter that I had almost given up trying to give up. You see, I was what we call a serial quitter. Every Sunday evening, I would try to quit smoking. And I would say that around 90% of my attempts to quit smoking lasted a couple of minutes. And I'd find myself rummaging around in the garbage looking for my smokes. So, you know, even as a relatively young man, I had more or less resigned myself to having to smoke for the rest of my life. And any of you who have reached that point, you will know what a profoundly depressing thought this is, that you're going to have to go through the rest of your life smoking. Then I attended an Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking seminar, and in 5 amazing hours, the cigarette went from being the center of my life to being totally irrelevant. I could not believe how easy it was to quit, or how amazing life was as a non-smoker. It just felt so good to get that monkey off my back. It had been dragging me down and holding me back my whole adult life. It just felt absolutely fantastic to be truly free and no longer controlled by a drug that, frankly, didn't even get me high. My energy levels and my enthusiasm for life returned, and for the first time, I was able to build my life on the things that I genuinely loved. Friends, family, health, happiness, freedom. This is what life's all about. Eventually, it was my wife, actually, that said, you know, we should get back in touch with these guys. And I did. I got back in touch with Alan to offer my services. And I was very, very privileged to be selected to train as a seminar facilitator and get the opportunity to help other people make this wonderful transformation. Now, when I first started doing this, I felt that certain types of smoker would find it much, much harder to quit than others. For instance, I felt that lighter smokers would find it much, much harder to quit than heavier smokers, which actually sounds counterintuitive. But if you think about it for a moment, it makes perfect sense. You see, very heavy smokers tend not to have any illusion that they enjoy smoking. They're just smoking because they can't stop, and they're very aware of this. Pleasure is nowhere in the building, quite frankly. However, people that smoke 2 or 3 or 4 cigarettes a day, they look forward to each cigarette like it's the most precious thing on the planet. And because this is primarily a psychological addiction, I think that makes that person just as addicted as a chain smoker. Over the years of doing this, I have actually come to realize that there is only one cause of failure using this approach, and it's a failure to follow the instructions. So your second instruction today is to follow all the instructions. Because if you do, by the end of this presentation, you will be a happy non-smoker. And all you have to do is follow the instructions. Your third instruction is to accept and to acknowledge that this is a technique that works for all types of smoker. And that means you too. There is no type of smoker for whom this won't work. I mean, think about it. We see over 50,000 smokers in our seminars every single year. Please trust me when I tell you, we see every conceivable type of smoker. And it's effective for all of them, so long as you follow the instructions. So, what is this amazing, magical, miracle quit smoking method? Well, over the years, there have been a number of wonderful descriptions of this technique. Some of the ones I really like. Sir Anthony Hopkins, the actor, quit smoking using Alan Carr's Easy Way, and he describes it beautifully. He says that being a smoker is like being trapped in a very complicated maze. And even though you want to get out, you don't know where to start. You don't know where to look. You don't know how to navigate your way out. He says it's as if Alan has a map of this maze, and he can help you just navigate your way out very simply. I love this description. It's such a wonderful and accurate one. Another description of this method I love, a journalist was writing a piece about Alan several years ago. They had a great way of describing this. They described it as a smoker's way to stop smoking. I love that, and it resonates actually with many, many, many smokers. Because, you know, let's face it, these days being a smoker in North America, it's a nightmare. You know, everyone's on your case, everyone's in your face, trying to humiliate you and make you feel guilty and stupid, and basically trying to terrify you into quitting smoking. And of course this doesn't work. And it doesn't work because smokers aren't stupid. Smokers are intelligent, strong-willed people who refuse to be pushed around by these sanctimonious do-gooders who have never smoked a day in their lives. This method is the absolute opposite of all of that sort of stuff. I mean, to be honest with you, if you're looking for a lecture on lung cancer and heart disease, you're in the wrong place. That stuff never helped me quit smoking, and if it was going to help you, it would have done it years ago. This approach, Alan Carr's Easy Way approach, I think treats smokers with intelligence and dignity and respect. And quite frankly, there isn't a lot of that being shown to smokers these days in North America. So this is a very, very revolutionary, unorthodox approach, but a very successful one. But I think the best description that I have ever heard of for this technique is one of our previous attendees described it as the opposite of willpower. The opposite of willpower. This, for me, is a fascinating concept. Basically what I'm saying is that if you're able to assimilate everything that goes on during this webcast, by the time you reach the end of this presentation, it would actually take you willpower to smoke a cigarette. It wouldn't take you any willpower whatsoever not to smoke. You would actually have to force yourself to light a cigarette. Now, this is a huge claim to make, and we need to look at this claim in a lot more detail. But before figuring out what the opposite of willpower is, first you have to define, well, what is willpower? Now, by the way, I'm going to refer to all other methods of stopping smoking as willpower, okay? Because you can slap a patch on, you can chew nicotine gum, you can pop these pills, you can go to hypnotherapist, whatever. But if you still believe that the cigarette gives you some pleasure or benefit or crutch, you're going to have a desire to smoke. And you're going to have to try to use willpower to overcome that desire. So, but going back to the question, what is willpower? Well, for me, willpower is very easy to define in a smoking context. It's where, in our minds, we add up all of the terrible disadvantages of being a smoker. The health, the money, the smell, so on and so forth. And we use these things to motivate ourselves to abstain. And the hope is that they will motivate you for long enough that you'll be able to abstain for long enough that one day you'll wake up and the need, the desire, the craving to smoke, whatever you want to call it, miraculously disappears. But those of you who have tried to quit smoking using willpower before know very well, it just doesn't work like that. And this, of course, is why you hear all of these horror stories from people who have quit smoking weeks or months, or in some cases even years ago. Still going nuts in stressful situations, pulling their hair out, having a huge desire to smoke in situations to enable them to relax, and having to use huge amounts of willpower to overcome that desire, even years after they've quit smoking. I mean, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like much fun to me. Now, when I was a smoker trying to quit, I used to really beat myself up over my inability to do so. And I always blamed myself. I thought that I was the problem. I thought that somehow I must be too weak or too stupid or too selfish. But now I actually understand smoking. Now I actually understand quitting. I realized that I was not the problem. It was the willpower approach itself that was the problem. Now, I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret here. I don't actually have any willpower. Literally none. So I find it baffling that, frankly, anyone can quit smoking using willpower, because there are so many flaws in the willpower approach itself. Now, I don't deny that people do quit smoking using willpower, but as Alan said, there are people that can make love standing up on a hammock. It doesn't mean it's the easiest or the most enjoyable way, does it? I think it's really important to understand the weaknesses and flaws in the willpower approach to quitting smoking, because it's really important to understand that, you're not the problem here. The problem is the willpower method itself. And I'm going to illustrate this point by highlighting a couple of the major flaws in the willpower approach to quitting smoking. The first flaw in the willpower approach to quitting smoking is that many of the things that we use to motivate ourselves to quit smoking, they do make you want to quit, but ironically, many of them also make you want to smoke. Now, this sounds illogical, so I will give you an example. Have you seen the latest sort of scare tactics ads on TV? The one I saw most recently was the one with a woman smoking through a tracheotomy, a hole in her throat. Have you seen this ad? Or, well, even if you haven't seen that ad, I'm sure you've seen tons of ones like it. What's the first thing you see when you see an ad like this? All smokers will agree. After seeing an ad like this, it's time to go for a cigarette. I mean, talk about irony. The American and Canadian Cancer Society spending millions, in some cases tens of millions of dollars, airing these ads to try to get people to quit smoking. The first thing a smoker wants to do? Go and have a cigarette. I mean, does anyone see the disconnect here? You see, actually, when you understand smoking, this all makes perfect sense. You see, most smokers, when they're confronted with an image like this on TV, someone smoking through a hole in their throat, they'll go into a kind of denial. It won't be me, it won't be me. You leave the room, you change the channel. But you see, deep down, where you keep all the big stuff, where you keep all the important stuff, there's a part of you that knows very well, that could be me. And of course, this provokes an emotional response that's based around fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety are extremely stressful emotions. And what's the first thing a smoker wants to do in a stress situation? Exactly. You got it. Go light a cigarette. So this is the first problem with the willpower approach to quitting smoking. Many of the things that we use to motivate ourselves to quit, in this case, fear of death, disease, disability, and so on, it does make you want to quit, but ironically, it also makes you want to smoke because it triggers this fear response. And because as smokers we associate smoking with stress relief, it makes smokers want to smoke more and less at the same time. So this is the first flaw in the willpower approach to quitting. The second flaw in the willpower approach to quitting smoking is that it focuses exclusively on all of the reasons that you shouldn't smoke. The health, the money, the smell, the secondhand smoke, so on and so forth. The problem is that we don't smoke for these reasons. I mean, every smoker knows all of these things about smoke, yet still they smoke. You see, I think when we look a little bit closer, we can see very clearly that willpower tries to solve the wrong problem. It keeps telling you why you shouldn't smoke, but you already know that. Smokers don't need help understanding why they shouldn't smoke. I think smokers need help understanding why they do smoke. You see, we don't smoke for the reasons we shouldn't smoke. We smoke for the reasons we do. So in a sense, willpower is worse than useless. It defines the problem, but it doesn't offer any solutions. But the biggest flaw in the willpower approach to quitting smoking, and for me at least by miles the biggest flaw in the willpower approach, is that it perpetuates this idea that by stopping smoking, you're giving something up. You're losing something. You're sacrificing something. Let me illustrate. Let's pretend I'm a smoker, okay? And this is my final cigarette. Okay, so I'm smoking away, smoking away, smoking away. I put it out. I am now a non-smoker using willpower. The problem is that when I was a smoker, I felt that this thing gave me something. Now I'm a non-smoker. I still believe it gave me something. But now I'm depriving myself of that thing. And so long as I feel deprived, I'm going to feel miserable and vulnerable. And as soon as I'm in a so-called trigger situation, a situation that I associate with smoking, I'm going to have a desire to smoke. And I'm going to have to try to use willpower to overcome that desire. This creates a conflict. Part of you wants to smoke, part of you doesn't. And it's this conflict that leads to the feelings of panic and anxiety and irritability and so on and so forth that so many smokers associate with quitting smoking. Ironically, it is not physical withdrawal from nicotine that creates these symptoms. It's conflict that creates these symptoms. And today, we're going to remove this conflict. And when you remove the conflict, you remove the symptoms that are associated with that conflict. And by removing these symptoms, of course, you make it very easy to quit. Now, don't expect to feel the same way as you've done when you're trying to quit smoking in the past. This time it's going to be easy. You're not going to feel deprived because you're not going to use the willpower method. You see, I think every smoker has a kind of tug of war going on, permanently being played out in their minds. On the one hand, sort of pulling you in this direction, you've got the fear that it's killing me, it's costing me a fortune, it's driving a wedge between me and my family. All of the fears that as smokers we live with sort of on a daily basis. But then on the other hand, pulling you in the opposite direction, there's this perceived benefit or pleasure or crutch or whatever you want to call it. Only this is an illusion. I mean, it's a very subtle illusion, but it's an illusion. Think about it for a minute. Aren't these benefits to smoking really no more than thinly disguised fears? The fear that I won't be able to relax. The fear I won't be able to concentrate. I won't be able to cope with stress. Actually, it's the fear that I won't be able to cope with life without my little crutch, without my little friend. Now, the irony of all of this is that the fear on both sides of the tug of war are caused by the cigarette. I mean, non-smokers don't have any of these fears. I mean, look at all these non-smokers walking around the streets. They're not obsessing about cigarettes, they're just getting on with life. It's only smokers that have all of these fears, because smoking creates these fears. And I think that one of the sweetest things about not having to smoke anymore is to be free of that fear. The constant niggling, nagging, low-level anxiety and edginess that as smokers we live with our whole smoking lives. In fact, we live with it to such a degree, we think it's normal to feel this way. It's not normal. Non-smokers don't feel anxious and edgy. It's smokers, because smoking creates the feeling of anxiety and edginess. Now it's time to begin to debunk some of the myths that are associated with smoking. And the first myth that I want to deal with is the myth that smokers choose to smoke. And I'm going to start with this one because when I was a smoker, it was one that probably bugged me the most. Now, I do agree that we chose to smoke those first cigarettes, most likely as a youngster. But tell me this, when did you decide that you would smoke all day, every day, for the rest of your life and never be able to stop? You see, no smoker ever makes such a decision. We smoked those first cigarettes really as an experiment. Maybe because our parents smoked, or it kind of seems that some of the older kids, some of the cooler kids smoke, and we're just trying to kind of emulate those. Little did we know that those first cigarettes would put us in these chairs today, would put us in this situation here today. And had we known, we never would have lit that first cigarette. In fact, we would have found it very easy not to light that first cigarette. You see, the idea that many non-smokers have, that somehow smokers are choosing to smoke, used to really bug me tremendously, because on the one hand, you have all of these sort of sanctimonious non-smokers accusing you of all sorts of ridiculous things. You know, you're choosing to pollute my environment, you're choosing to expose my baby to secondhand smoke and all of this kind of thing. And then on the other hand, you have the tobacco companies sort of saying things like, well, you know, people are choosing to buy our product. This is a choice that they're making. But you know and I know that genuine choice went out of the window years and years and years ago with respect to smoking. And to illustrate this point, I'm going to pose a couple of fairly stupid questions. First up, how many smokers do you think are unaware of the health risks of smoking? 50%? 10%? 1%? Probably even less. How many smokers, how many of those smokers do you think dispute the health risks of smoking? Same number? Probably even fewer? Have you ever worked out how much you spend on smoking? I used to tell myself, you know, a couple of bucks a day, something like that. But I tell you what, when you smoke all day, every day, for year after year after year, that couple of bucks a day sure does add up. The reality is that the average smoker in North America has to earn $250,000 in salary in order to finance a pack-a-day smoking habit. Now, I don't care how rich you are. $250,000 is a lot of money. So back to this idea of choice. This is the situation. We're sitting here and we're saying that we know that smoking has been implicated in all of these horrendous diseases and conditions. That for the most part, we accept that smoking causes these diseases and conditions. And we are prepared to spend $250,000 of our own money exposing ourselves to these risks. And people are expecting us to accept that this is a choice that they're making? It doesn't make any sense. Who would choose such a thing? I mean, do you think alcoholics choose to become alcoholics? Of course not. They start drinking, slowly it takes over their lives, ends up ruining it. I mean, when you started smoking, most likely as a teenager or a very young adult, were you really deciding that you would smoke all day, every day, for the rest of your life, never being able to stop? Of course not. We fell into a trap. Actually, we all fell into the same trap. And today, I'm going to describe this trap to you in great detail. And this information will enable you to just walk away from the whole thing. It's an amazing opportunity to create wonderful positive change in your life. But you really need to be aware there are only two choices on the table here. There's no sort of middle ground. You can either keep doing what you're doing, smoke all day, every day, for the rest of your life, never being able to quit, feeling like this or worse, because let's face it, it's not suddenly going to get better, is it? It's just going to get progressively worse. This is one option. The other option is to get this drug out of your life so that you can begin to build your life based on the things that you genuinely love. Friends, family, health, happiness, freedom. These are the only options you have. There is no middle ground. You either smoke or you don't. I suppose it's a little bit like being pregnant, really. You can't be a bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. And so it is with smoking. You can't be a non-smoker who smokes. You need to be very, very clear about what you're trying to achieve here. Now, I realize that many people watching this webcast will be doing so under duress or pressure from people they love, their friends, their family, their kids, their parents, their employers, and so on. And it would be wonderful if you could quit smoking for all of these amazing people in your life. But in my experience, you can't. Your fourth instruction is to stop smoking for the purely selfish reason that you will enjoy your life 10 times more without dragging this ball and chain with you everywhere you go. You will enjoy life so much more with this monkey off your back that for years has been dragging you down and holding you back from being the person that you want to be and the person that you're capable of being. That's why you should do this. And your fifth instruction is to abandon the usual feelings of doom and gloom and misery and depression usually associated with quitting. Instead, think how amazing it will be not to have your life dominated by a drug that doesn't even get you high. Imagine the freedom to go wherever you want to go, do whatever you want to do, see whoever you want to see, without constantly having to factor in your need to smoke. These are amazing gifts that you're earning for yourselves here today. The gift of a fuller, happier life and the gift of true freedom. And you should give yourself permission to enjoy every minute of it. Now, the vast majority of the smokers we see in our live sessions, if they're being honest with you, they'll tell you, quite frankly, I wish I'd never even heard of smoking, much less stuck one in my mouth. But every so often you come across someone that says, no, 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 I love smoking. I love it. So in part 2, we'll begin to look at some of the things that smokers appear to enjoy about smoking. See you there.